Hi, and welcome back to AWS Cost Optimization. In this lesson, we're going to cover just some tips for cost management. We've gone through quite a bit throughout this course, and in this moment, I want to kind of just use this slide to give some practical ideas and the layout I usually go about when I am implementing cost management in the environments I go into. The first one is going to be planning. Now, this is an obvious one. It should always come first. And you want to think about this as new services that are coming into the environment and maybe new services in AWS that come out. How are you going to roll that out in your environment? And so what you want to do is take some moments before you rush to do it and make some plans around it. The next thing, once you have things running, we all have things running in AWS. So now the next part is going to be optimizing what we have. Now, optimization is going to be a continuous thing we're going to do. We're going to need to do this regularly because things are changing. Workloads change, maybe something new we find, all this stuff. So optimization is one of those never-ending ones. So you're going to keep optimizing your environment. And the next one is remediation. These aren't the fun ones, but these are when you get those bills that are a shock that you did not expect to see. And what you need to do to go in and find that issue and solve it. Let's start with planning. Throughout this course, we covered a lot of tools to help us in this planning stage. Some things I want us to remember and keep in mind is, let's say we're planning this new service. Now, what is going to be the anticipated workload? Is it going to be 24/7? Is it only, a 9 to 5 type of service where it's only going to be allowed to be running during business hours? Is it going to have a ton of traffic? Do we need to put something like a CloudFront distribution in front of it? Or does it not need that? It's not necessary to waste the cost of the CDN. Understanding this workload and really go into the weeds, go into the details on that new application, find out everything you can. And everything we've learned about all the services in this course really can help you to ask the right questions. So you want to know what's going to affect your price. And so when you ask the right questions that relate to the price, you get the answers that you might need. And some things don't have answers, and that's where the optimization will come in. But it's good to get as much of it as you can answered before you go into actually rolling it out, because that will save you a lot of headache and a lot of those remediation events. Next thing to think about is the application's architecture. You'll want to understand, can we maybe run this serverless? Or maybe it's a container? Or maybe it has to be server-based. If you can get things to a serverless, you might end up saving some money. But you need to decide that based on the application if it makes sense. Next thing I wrote down in the application architecture is about data. There is a lot of different ways to store the data. There's S3, there's DynamoDB, we have a lot of different ways to store data. What's going to be the best way? And then maybe what's the best flow as well? How should that data go from service to service and from service to user? How should that flow work? And remember, a lot of those services had data transfer fees. And so how can you optimize that to maybe keep everything in one region and limit how much data has to be moved outside of the region? I'm just throwing out ideas here, but that might be something to help limit the data transfer costs. And then retention of data. So if it's an S3 object, maybe you can delete it after 6 months or 90 days. And so you can help keep those S3 buckets clear, and maybe the EBS snapshots can be deleted over time. So you can really help keep your environment clean. Another thing in planning that is really good to bring up is thinking about reserved instances. or savings plans. Maybe you have a savings plan that has capacity that you aren't using and you can utilize that. Or maybe you need to reach out and get some more savings plans or reserved instances to cover the new workload. And when I start planning phase, when I do reserved instances or savings plans, you usually are going to have a range. You're going to say, I'm going to have maybe 1,000 users to 5,000 users. And so I might need 1 instance to 5 instances. Well, in the planning phase, we don't want to just buy the 5 instances if we don't know we need them. So you can either do one of two things. You can wait to do the reserved instance purchase until you know this is running and you can start to see the traffic. Or if you want to be proactive, you can get for the minimum. So you know it's at least 1 server. So let's buy the 1 server and then the other 4 would be on demand. Maybe they could even be spot instances. But whatever it is, make sure that you decide which way you're going to go about it. Maybe you be proactive, buy the minimum. And then as you start to get that traffic, you notice that you're steadily using 3 servers. So you end up buying the additional 2 reserved instances. It's just important to keep it in mind at the beginning, because as you keep it in mind in the beginning, you'll be able to identify places in the future or places right away that you can save by purchasing these. And some of the tools that are helpful in this planning phase, I put here, we went over the AWS Calculator, and that was able to show us that we can actually come up with an idea of how much a service is going to be. It's not going to be exact, like we know that, but it's going to be pretty close. One other thing I think is very important in the planning phase that might be overlooked is making sure that the budgets are set up correctly. So you might put a budget around a specific workload using tagging or using other things that you might be able to say, I want this service to be this much money per month. Or maybe you need to also go in and modify your overall budget, that this account shouldn't have more than this much a month, but maybe you're adding that service, so you need to increase that a little bit. So that way you're not getting false alerts. So taking the budgets into consideration is really important. The next is the optimization. This is that continual process. Now we have the Cost Explorer and we have QuickSight for cost and usage reports that we can utilize to kind of do fine-grained reporting. And that might help us to understand places where we need to optimize. Trusted Advisor is another great place to find those optimization tweaks that we might need to increase efficiency or to decrease cost. And we went over some of these tools in this course as well as the Instant Scheduler. Now that's going to be the Instant Scheduler where we can turn off and on instances that aren't being utilized in the evenings or in the mornings, for instance. And so we can actually save a lot of cost doing that. The next thing, which is probably the main thing that will be never ending, is right sizing. Because traffic patterns will change, users will come to the platform and might leave the platform. And so you're going to have a fluctuation in this right sizing all the time. So it's good practice to actually plan this out. Maybe you look at your metrics every 3 months or every 6 months and you ask the team, do we need to right size these instances differently? And that might allow you to make some good changes that will increase efficiency and decrease cost. During those right sizing moments and meetings, you might also be looking at reserved instances and savings plans to either add to, or maybe you don't need them and you can start taking away some. So you want to be able to understand and measure that and continually change it. You want to make sure you are keeping that in the forefront. Don't let them just slip away, but that if you need to buy more, purchase more so that way you can spend less overall. And the last one is the remediation. And this is those ones, like I said, when you get that bill and it is way too much. So there are things we can do to kind of catch those early, like we went over budgets. Trusted advisor will catch some really good things there as well. And this comes down to a lot of different reasons why your bill could have jumped up. We could have right sizing issues. Maybe it's your reserved instances and savings plans. Maybe they auto renewed for the year. Well, there's things like that could have come up. And maybe those are the ones that you know the answer to. But, maybe you need to do application re-architecture. Maybe you don't realize that DynamoDB was configured incorrectly, and maybe you can re-architect the usage of DynamoDB. There are different things here. I'm pulling out examples, but remediation will be the one that you want to not have to spend time in. But when it comes, you'll have to go through and find out that top dollar item, which will be in that Cost Explorer. And then you can drill down into the details of each service and find the thing that is causing that inflation in the price. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. When you're ready, feel free to move on to the next lesson.